should I demonstrate how to? I am a neurodivergent person. And what that means for me is that I have an anxiety disorder that, among other things, sometimes makes me actually pass out. Public speaking isn't usually one of the triggers, so we should be okay. You should be okay in the front row. It's not particularly debilitating. It's just a fact about me. It doesn't affect my speech or my mobility or my job prospects. It's just a fact, like that I have red hair or that my grandmother was a professional clown. That is true. But it is a disorder, and it's something I've seen doctors about and take medication for, and I have been the emergency medical situation on an airplane before, which isn't like a barrel of laughs. So it probably makes me a little more sensitive to ableist language than the average person. And I'm an editor, so I'm already sensitive to language. In fact, one of the things I've been trying to do in recent years to be a more thoughtful person and a better ally is to refrain from using language that groups of people find hurtful, to remove microaggressions from my vocabulary. And that includes like trying not to call mixed gender groups of coworkers guys, things like that. And it also includes not using words associated with disability to connote negative meanings. Words like crazy and lame and blind and insane and so on. So I gotta tell you, when I see brands using ableist terminology in their copy, which unlike our speech is subject to several layers of internal review, it's like, because you're kind of drawing a line between people's physical and mental conditions and that which is unfortunate or undesirable. And I think we can do better. Fortunately, I work for a pretty thoughtful company. Help Scout, without making it sound too much like a commercial, is a certified B Corp. We have a fully remote team. We have a diverse staff. We advocate for, we support organizations that advocate for environmental sustainability and human rights and increasing representation of women and people of color in tech. It's a pretty special company full of lovely people who care a lot about other people. And last year, one of those lovely people, our VP of engineering, Megan Chinberg, called for removing the word cripple from Help Scout's vernacular. She said, I realize this is a common word used in English to emphasize how destructive a particular pattern or event can be. However, there are several other words that mean the same thing and don't compare dire or sub-ideal situations with the physical state of another human. She was totally right. Even with the words I was trying to be careful about, though, like even with my sensitivity to ableist language, cripple wasn't a word that was on my radar, which made me feel bad because words are like my whole job. And it made me wonder how many times in 8 years of publishing history at Help Scout we had inadvertently used ableist or other problematic terminology in our content. So I decided to audit our site for ableist and other problematic language. This is where the actionable stuff comes in that I know y'all like. So to start with, we needed a comprehensive list of the words we were looking for. So I consulted various sources, which are linked to, by the way. The best ones are linked to in the landing page you see at the top of every slide here, along with the slides and some other goodies. And I invited the team to contribute to the list, and we put a list together. So that's the first step I would recommend, is figure out the language you're looking for. And what we came up with looked something like this. Just as an aside, if you're looking at that list and you're feeling a little bit like, whatever, lady, I get it. Nobody likes the feeling of tools being removed from their toolkits or of their language being policed. And I am not interested in policing anyone's language either. But what I am saying is that there's some nuance here, you know? So if you're thinking like, what, I can't say stupid now? Not exactly. You know, I still use the word stupid sometimes, although I'm trying to cut back. But yeah, there's a difference between words you might use in casual conversations with your friends and content your company publishes on its website. The next step was to crawl our site for these words. We used the Screaming Frog SEO spider, although of course there are plenty of other tools you could use, methods you could use. And it spat out 72 matches. 72 times we had used some variation of these words in our content. We hadn't used every bad word in the book, but here are the ones we had discovered we had misused on Help Scout's site. Lots of these were within phrases we leaned on over and over again. Help Scout makes customer service software for small to medium-sized businesses. So we write a lot about customer experience. And there were a lot of cliches like, there are no stupid questions, and don't leave your support team flying blind, that kind of thing. Next, we needed alternatives to these words. And there are plenty of great alternatives, but a global find and replace wasn't going to be an option because A, not every instance of these words is necessarily inappropriate, right? Like one older blog post told a story about a legally blind customer, and that's fine. That's just a statement of fact. Again, it's not equating someone's physicality with anything negative. And then B, we use words like crazy and dumb to mean dozens of things. These words tend to be kind of lazy placeholders for more precise language. So every update I made led to clearer, better writing. The word dumb would become trivial or silly. The word crazy became hectic or wild. The word insane became abundant in one case. Making all of these updates all at the same time made it really clear how frequently and reflexively we lean on a discourse of disability in signifying that which is undesirable. So many times I changed the word dumb to mean some variation of bad, which felt bad. But it felt really good to make these edits and to take that step toward making our entire body of content more welcoming to everyone. After these changes were made, we updated our style guide to clarify what we mean about using inclusive, neutral language. And for good measure, bullet points, sorry Greg, we quoted subject matter experts from underrepresented groups, added language about that. We are currently, we added language also about soliciting images that showcase different axes of diversity outside the standard stock images you'd expect from your average software blog. We're also currently working on captioning all of our videos. We're aiming for broader representation across our illustration style and in our customer testimonials. And then we're aiming for better accessibility across our entire site and our product line in general. And just as a side note here, I know a lot of you are already familiar with this, but it bears reinforcing. What is good for accessibility is also often good for SEO. Things like really descriptive image captions and alt text and super descriptive anchor link text, things like that. There's a lot of overlap there, and I've included links to resources in that URL at the top of every slide. Anyway, that's how we got here. We identified the words and phrases we wanted to look for. We identified where those words were used. We edited those instances with more precise, inclusive language, and then we institutionalized their usage in our style guide. After the project was done, I wrote a blog post about it. And the cool thing about that was, on top of it being generally pretty well received, that readers started raising their hands to tell us what else we might want to be careful about. They called us out on using words like madhouse and bananas as synonyms for crazy, words that weren't in that original list. They came forward and they said, hey, you know, I don't particularly love it when these other words are used either. This person commented, those of us with large vascular birthmarks definitely would appreciate it if you would remove stained as a pejorative. I had no idea about that. I had used the phrase political correctness run amok in my blog post, and someone else pointed us toward this Wikipedia page. Sudden mass assault, psychopathological behavior in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Again, I had no idea. Maybe the rest of you in this room familiar with the etymology of that phrase. I was not. But anyway, it was really cool because our community was coming forward and saying, you want to do a better job making me feel included? Here's how. And we said, great, thank you. We will get that changed. And we did, and people appreciated it. Help Scout is lucky to have a pretty loyal, lovely community already. But making these kinds of changes really validates our customers' choice to do business with us. To be clear, we did not do this for the PR. We did it because it's the right thing to do. But there's also something pretty magical about speaking up about your values as an organization and having your audience notice and say, hey, I like that about that company. I feel good about doing business with them. And no, these aren't grand gestures. Like, obviously, there are more important things going on in the world. We don't claim to have solved any massive problems here, like whether a company blog uses the word insane is probably pretty trivial compared to most other injustices. But on the other hand, little things add up. And taking these kinds of steps can be an important step toward shifting the public discourse and making the world a safer, more welcoming place for everyone. What I keep coming back to is when we can choose between behavior that upsets some people versus behavior that upsets no one, why wouldn't we choose to upset no one? Let's go back to the word cripple as an example. It makes some people feel bad. Not everyone, but some people. And let's say that in the context you're using it, that a more precise synonym would be the word stifled. The word stifled is neutral. It doesn't make anyone feel bad. So it's a better writing choice and a more inclusive one. I would challenge us all to just listen to people. Let's do our own research, our own Googling. We're all good at that. Maybe read some firsthand accounts of what it feels like to constantly be on the receiving end of microaggressions and thoughtless language. And then consider what a rich, beautiful language English is to work with, and that we almost always have neutral synonyms that generally strengthen our communication, and practice substituting those more inclusive words, because very little harm is going to come of it, and some of your readers will notice and appreciate you for it. The stats and definitions vary, but anywhere from 15 to 25% of people worldwide experience some form of disability. That is a not insignificant chunk of our audience. And maybe, not everybody in that demographic cares about this stuff, but disability is just one factor among many intersecting axes of privilege and oppression. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but there are a lot of people who aren't young, rich, straight, able-bodied, good-looking white guys. And like me, they are starting to notice when brands are using images or language that makes them feel excluded. Now, I just did this project because I could. I run a blog, so it was within my power. And if you, as digital marketing professionals, have some influence over the content your company has published over the years, then efforts like these are within your power too. If you're concerned you'll run up against resistance, like maybe your leadership isn't convinced it's worth the resources, or they don't want to get involved in anything that might be perceived as too political. Let me just share a quick story about what worked in a conversation with one of the leaders at my company. This person was generally on board with the idea. He just didn't want to stop personally using the word crazy, which I totally get. The word is everywhere. Everybody uses it. You could totally make an argument that its usage is several generations removed from its origin. So I said, yes, fine, you're right. But again, words like crazy tend to be kind of lazy stand-ins for more precise language. So if you choose which word you really mean in context, you'll strengthen your communication. You'll sound smarter. You know, your content will be more valuable. And then just as a side effect, like some of those people who are used to feeling marginalized might notice that you're taking steps to make them feel more included, and that may well impact their loyalty to your brand. So even if you have a cold, dead heart and you don't care about anybody, it has a positive effect. Plus, it takes very little actual work. What it comes down to for me, though, is my desire to make a particular word choice doesn't supersede someone else's need for safety and inclusion. You know, it's not my place to question or put more pressure on already marginalized groups of people to defend themselves or to explain why it's hurtful when I make certain language choices. So why wouldn't we default to neutrality? Why wouldn't we default to clearer writing and better communication? And why wouldn't we make our content as welcoming as possible to everyone who comes across it? Thank you.